Hey there, and welcome back to Transformers the Game. As you recall, in the last episode, we began our examination of the low-res versus the high-res assets in the suburbs, which led to some quite interesting discoveries. And now, we are going to continue our examination with the first Decepticon chapter, SOCCENT Military Base. Now, there's not going to be nearly as much for this as there was for the suburbs, but who knows, maybe there'll be some changes here that really surprise us. And here we are as Blackout. Why don't we have a look at him before we move any further? So, beginning with his helicopter mode, I can already notice quite a few interesting distinctions. In general though, the color seems to be about the same. However, starting from the front here, I can already tell that the low-res has one detail better than the high-res already. That front circular section is brightened up on the low-res, and it is not on the high-res. Because that bright section there, that's correct. He should have had that. He didn't. Moving to another angle. The high definitely has a lot more detailing near the upper portion. The numbers seem to be completely different. It's 0367 for the high res and 4428 for the low res. Also, the low res has another feature that again, I wish high res would copy more. And that is the use of individual text meshes on the model. The high-res just has the text skinned onto the main texture, so it's mirrored and it's not very legible. But this, on the low-res, is individualized, unmirrored, and a really good choice with this. I wish they had stuck with it. It would have worked really well for characters like Blackout who are just littered with text. It's a good idea. They should have stuck with it. Moving to the back, the high-res seems to have a section completely missing, or the low-res has an additional one. I'm not too familiar with my details on the Pavlocopter, so I don't know if the low-res is actually right and the high-res is wrong. I'll have to check that. Oh, but I do see low-res has these bars coming down the sides, like these support bars. High-res does not. I'm gonna have to check and see if that's correct. Low-res also has a bit of a different design for the tail section. It's got like 3 individual pieces compared to the simple stick out that the high-res one has. I'm telling you, looking at this now, low-res looks a lot better model-wise compared to the high-res. That's ironic. Also, his tail designation. I like how clean that is. God, that is sloppy. That's just a really ugly text thing compared to the low-res, which looks so much better. Again, different numbers. You have the 551 and the 4428. Well, the actual Blackout was 3500X, I believe. So neither of these are technically right, but at least the low-res has the numbers a bit closer in regards to length. Well, moving over to textures, it is more of the same. You got a jumbled up mess and a very small image. Compared to the high-res, which has 2 textures, the main body and the additional parts. Yeah, high-res is definitely superior when it comes to textures. Though low-res does have the additional text texture. Now, of course, these are very low-quality images, but I wish they had decided to stick with this. It was a great idea. Why not stick with it? You know, it's practical. It's just a good design idea that they really should have stuck with. Low-res as it may be, it's still, the principle of it is really, really good. What a shame. Well, let's move over to Robot, which isn't even a contest. The high-res is way superior. God, the face on the low-res is just so bad. The high-res just has way more depth and detail. I will give low-res one thing. The individually modeled parts at his arms right there. I like that. The high-res just has it textured, which honestly doesn't look bad, but, you know, I do kind of like the individually modeled pieces, which I bet that was a pain to do, but it still looks nice. And the armor in general on the legs is just a lot sharper, a lot more detailed on the high. Moving on to the back, it's still pretty darn distinct, huh? The high-res's detail is obviously far superior, but Blackout's left cheek in high-res, despite the fact of being unmirrored when it actually, you know, should be, looks like it's weighted wrong. The low-res seems to be sticking out a bit more properly and isn't clipping inside the thigh, but the high-res, it's kind of peeking through his leg there, which is interesting, annoying, but, you know, it could just be the animation stance he's in, but it looks like it's weighted differently. I wonder how they get these details wrong for the high-res when you have them already set up for the low. Quite interesting. Moving on to textures, Blackout is no different in robot mode compared to vehicle mode. It is still a jumbled up mess. Seriously, I couldn't even tell you what half of that stuff even does. Comparing that to the high-res, which has the same free texture maps that you are used to. Well, I think that's all I can really say for Blackout. Let's carry on with our exploration. And what better place to continue from than the airbase itself? It appears to have the same general design, though the lighting seems a bit different. Let's take a look at it in a bit more depth. Here is the high-res version that we are used to, and here is the low. The low has a much darker lighting going on here, compared to the high, which is super, well, not super bright, but brighter compared to the low. I like the overall darker feel you get from this version. The high-res is just too bright and clear. Even though the high-res planes are very nice, the general map aesthetic is just better on the low-res. I just really like that dark, clouded look. The general structure is, again, the same, and the smoothness of the low-res sand textures actually really nice. I think that might be what the problem is for the high-res textures. The high-res just seem to contrast way too much. Yeah, I just like the natural blend the low-res has. It's way better. Moving a little further, the base design is, you know, generally the same, though the buildings are open on the high-res and closed on the low. Also looks like the road symbol is a bit bigger on the high. Actually, the symbols look completely different. Huh. Moving back to the command center, kind of a similar situation going on here. You've got some more open buildings on the high-res. You definitely get a lot more detail in that render distance, which is also nice, but the general atmosphere of the low-res just looks really nice. The environments just blend so much better. Maybe that could be fixed with a texture mod. That might be something to look into at some point. Well, either way, high-res or low-res, it's still fun to rip the entire place to pieces. But let us continue on to Scorponok, who, aside from the texture quality, doesn't seem that different, but let's take a more detailed look to be sure. In order to actually get a decent look at this guy, I had to do some animation swapping so he wouldn't be spinning around all the time. And speaking of his animations, I think I actually noticed a weighting problem with the low-res Scorponok. At the lower region below his tail, there appears to be a section of armor that is spinning along with his inner mechanisms, which, compared to the high-res, is not moving. There is also some color on his tail that appears to be inverted from the high-res. The low-res has it as tan compared to the high-res, which is silver. There are also some inner parts of Scorponok's feet in low-res that are silver when they should be tan, or whatever color you want to call this. Gold, I don't know. And one final thing I noticed is that low-res Scorponok has no optic textures. Not sure how they missed that, but all in all, I'd say they're not that different. Moving to textures, we have the same situation as Blackout. A jumbled up, low-quality mess, compared to the high-res, which has 3 sets to work with. One for the armor, one for the inner portions, and one for more prominent details. That is quite a leap, hop, and a skip away from what the low-res has, that's for sure. Resuming our examination of the map itself, we have the military base, which is the only area I have seen so far with actual structural changes. That being the complete absence of one building on the low-res. Moving in a bit closer, the general design is, again, about the same, though, in a weird twist of fate, the high-res textures seem to blend a little better than the low-res. That aside, all the barracks look the same, and getting a closer look at that building, things seem a bit off. Despite being the roughly same position as close as I could get it, placements seem a bit different. I'm not exactly sure what's up, but the placements of the lampposts seem just different somehow. As far as I could tell, I got a central lock on that building there, but the section to the side of it just seems different. Obviously, there's the inclusion of that bonus building, but even aside from that, the basketball field on the low-res is just so simple. Yeah, maybe my angle is just off, but there seems to be something pretty different about this area. But, continuing with our examination of the map, we have the village, which name escapes me for the moment. It seems to share the same general design between high and low res. Though, naturally, the high res has some more detailed walls and buildings. Moving in a little closer, we have a few minor differences in regards to the buildings. There may even be some slight elevation differences as well. Yeah, aside from the detailed buildings and extra objects, not a whole lot different here. Well, continuing on with the tour, we have the communication towers, which, as you probably expect, aren't that different. Yeah, aside from some extra detailing, there isn't a whole lot going on here. Though I have to say, I truly think there are some significant terrain differences between the low-res and the high-res versions. Because I searched my darndest to find a section in the high-res map that had a comms tower to the left and to the right. And I couldn't find it. Because I could have sworn it was right atop the military base, but I couldn't find it. The terrains just didn't line up, so I don't know. Maybe there's actually some different placements, or I just completely missed it. I don't know. Either way, I am certainly convinced there are some significant terrain differences between maps. Of course, while doing so, this happened. Didn't know those buildings could kill you so fast. But, with all that said, I think we have covered all there is to cover for SOCCENT. Well, if I could say one thing, this level definitely proved that there are some assets low-res did better than high-res. Maybe not 100%, but definitely some significant advantages over the high-res. Because the terrain blending for the low-res is just so nice. I thought it was just maybe a suburbs thing, but it looks like a continuing trend. That, and the significant differences in Blackout's vehicle mode, really show low-res has some decent qualities to it. Though it also has its unique issues in the form of Scorponok's misweighted tail. I think honestly if you gave the high-res Qatar a improved texture job for the sand, I think it'll fix it up pretty good. But I think that is all there is to say for this episode. A bit of a shorter one, I know, but I think we'll make up for that in the next episode, where we are returning to the Autobots in Chapter 2. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Let me know if you prefer the high-res version or the low-res version of Qatar. I will see you in the next one. Till then, play your guitar in Qatar.